Hello and welcome back to the NAAC Conversation. My name is Ted Seelheimer from the University of Houston, the NAAC Rules Education Committee, and I'm here to talk this month about topics concerning what's going on in Indianapolis as they deal with the COVID pandemic, just as we are here on our campuses. Here to talk about this with me today is Kris Richardson, Director for Academic and Membership Affairs at the NCAA. So Kris, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ted.
Well, can you tell us, I guess, I know that you wear a lot of different hats. Can you tell us kind of all the different pots you have your hands in there at the NCAA and with NAAC?
Sure. Yeah, for me, I would do a lot within Division One. So work with a lot of our bylaw teams. So many of the NAC members, again, you're used to talking to our 11, 13, 17 team, our 12, 15, 16 team for different interpretive issues, our 4-4 waiver team. So pretty much if it doesn't deal with academic eligibility, that's one of the teams that I, as one of the Division One bylaw team directors, help to oversee and direct. Beyond that, I work with the Division One Interpretations Committee. So Andy Lothane, our primary liaison, and his team, I work with them, with Matt Boyer, the current chair, to manage that almost weekly call these days, with lots of interpretive issues out there making their way in front of the committee. I help liaise with enforcement. So if we've got interpretive issues that are coming up as they're doing an investigation or as they're preparing a notice of allegation, if there are questions like that, the other directors and I help to coordinate that work as well. The Committee for Legislative Relief, so the normal legislative relief waivers, so all of that stuff that sort of fits within that bylaw team bucket, those are the things that I do. If you start to expand that circle a little wider, I'm also AMA's Director for Technology. So as we're dealing with all of this virtual everything right now, so lots of kudos to Jerry Vaughn and the rest of the team for helping to manage that. But that's something that I oversee, whether it's issues with our cell phones, with our teens access, with our wireless data plans, whatever that happens to be. I help to direct that for AMA. And then keep spinning that circle out. We look at the governance space. A lot of folks have probably seen my name associated with things coming out of the Football Oversight Committee. So definitely a team effort. We've got a strong team supporting Shane Lyons as the chair and Patty Viverito as the vice chair. But as with all of our governance groups, we're used to meeting about 4 times a year. The Football Oversight Committee since April has met almost weekly to help, again, manage the onset of the COVID-19 situation, then the evolution of it, and then return to play and what that was going to look like. And they've continued with almost a weekly meeting cadence since then. As we start to think about how I interface with the membership, I'm a liaison with the CCACA for Division One. So help with those meetings with Matt Burgermeister of the ACC being their current chair, do a lot of collaboration with them. We have an advisory group that helps give feedback. And last but certainly not least, I'm one of the 2 NCAA members of the NAAC board. And I've held that position for quite a while. And this will be my last year, unfortunately, serving on the board. So by June of 21, it'll be time for someone else from the staff to pick up that particular torch.
That's a lot, Kris. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So thanks.
That's right.
Well, I think that's actually one of the big reasons why I was hopeful to be able to talk to you is obviously you're involved with a lot, and we see your name on a lot of stuff that's coming out, especially now, with the COVID Q&A. Probably one of the biggest things that's been a help and an evolving thing that everyone on campus has been using. Can you tell us about how I think we all know how the COVID Q&A started, but how it kind of became what it is in terms of the process, and then how it's evolved, since the spring till now.
Yeah, absolutely. This was something, as we often do, whether we're dealing with a hurricane or other natural disaster, whether it's something new and different that descends upon the membership and that everybody is scrambling to try to figure out how to best protect, serve our student athletes and what they're trying to achieve in their lives, looking for guidance. So it started off as we were getting a lot of questions. Again, we hope that AMA continues to be a good, solid resource for the membership throughout really anything that's going on, but particularly in times of crisis. So it started off as we were getting all the questions coming in, and it very quickly made sense. We knew not only for Division One, but for Divisions 2 and 3, we needed a kind of a go-to spot for that. Just the kind of the standard, well, Houston's got a question or School X has a question, we'll just answer all those as one-offs. That wasn't going to be efficient or effective for our staff. Certainly wasn't going to be efficient, effective for the membership. So from that enterprise, the Q&A guide was born. I'll be honest and say when we started this, going on 9 months ago, certainly we didn't imagine that we'd still be doing almost weekly updates to that document,
Right.
let alone that we would have added an action chart or an action for considerations chart to it, or even that the NCA would have an entire web page dedicated to COVID-19 and related resources. But here we are, and hopefully we've been able to grow and evolve and continue to meet the needs of our membership.
Yeah. Have there been any sort of guiding principles that you guys have used when addressing these interpretive issues or just COVID situations at large?
The kind of what I would look to as the sort of the guiding principles, where can we really help add value? And that is driven a lot by our membership. So if we are getting a number of questions, whether that's coming in through the almost weekly calls that our staff still engages with the CCACA, because they've also been doing a lot of work as conferences, again, on pretty much a weekly basis. So we gather a lot of feedback from them. We're in regular contact with the NAAC officers, just in the board, to see what questions or concerns are coming from them as well. And then certainly just anything and everything that comes into us through our SRO, through our conversations with our colleagues out there in the membership. All of those things drive that. So that guiding principle is what's really going to help set that national standard, and where possible, where do we need national guidance?
Sure.
There may be something going on in a particular part of the country or even on a particular campus that is front and center for them, but that situation may be so unique as to not warrant inclusion in the Q&A, even though we're going to continue to provide that good direct support to that school or that conference for the situation they're dealing with.
Right. Is there anything that sticks in your mind as something that is going to, when this is done, if you know when that is, please tell me, that is going to outlast the Q&A and, is a change or an interpretation that may get codified down the line?
I think a lot of what we see in the COVID space has been again, you don't want to call it necessarily an experiment. I mean, there's, again, real issues, real lives on the line, and real public health and safety concerns. But it has provided the membership a really good opportunity to test some areas, to see if some long-standing rules that we've had in place, I'm thinking particularly about recruiting, are all of those necessary and appropriate. And it's been interesting to see especially in Division I, where folks are so used to your jet setting all over the country, all over the globe. And now here we are in November, you're getting ready to head into another signing class. And from a lot of even the ADs I've talked to and some of the coaches that I've talked to, they feel like they're in pretty good shape. Certainly not universal, but that virtual recruiting space has really proven to be effective for a lot of folks across the country. Yeah. And that is something we're looking at now, as we're not sure, to your point, when this is all going to, quote, end. If this temporary dead period continues to be temporary but stretches into 21 or beyond, is that virtual recruiting environment where it should be? Or are there some areas there where maybe that could continue to evolve and change now that we've been living in that situation for the better part of a recruiting cycle?
Right. And I think most of the coaches at this point, as they are aware and understand the reasons behind it, still are coaches and see recruiting and understand the necessity to do that, and are looking, okay, well, we were told July, August, September, now January, and potentially beyond. Is there, as I've answered the question of, well, is the dead period going to get extended? And it's like, well, if the circumstances around the dead period changed, and maybe then the question that I would ask you is there any change in how the NCAA is looking at the dead period in terms of the necessity for it, or is it the same evaluation that you're going through right now and determining whether or not it may be extended beyond January 1?
I think that's a good way to illustrate the collaborative nature of the work. I've talked a lot about the engagement with the CCACA, with NAAC, with the membership, the compliance folks, the ADs, the coaches, the student athletes. But there is that other side to that. There is that medical, that health and safety side. So that's where our governance structure has played a real critical role. I mean, if you watch, I feel like the board has been as involved in this and kind of setting the direction for the division in this area as much as they have in anything in recent memory. I mean, again, you've got things transfer, NIL. I don't want to discount those, but if you really think about what's everybody waking up to and dealing with every morning of every day since March, April, COVID-19, and our governance structure has done a really good job of staying involved. Right. So whether that's the committee for the safeguard and medical aspect of sport, whether that's the board, whether that's the council, any one of their numerous subcommittees, that's really been the the driving piece there of how we stay on top of that. Dr. Hainline, not only being our chief medical officer here at the national office, but also being very plugged in to what is happening nationally. That's all been really informative and instructive. And I think the membership, that council in particular, and the board have really benefited from his presence and the work that the COVID action group and the others have been able to do during this time to help decide what's right and appropriate. Because again, the country has moved in fits and starts of what's gotten better and what's gotten worse. So it's been good to have a kind of a guiding sentiment or somebody who is very plugged in and being able to use our governance structure to help set that policy, help set that North Star for us as we try to navigate through this.
Gotcha. Well, and I, thinking again back to the COVID Q&A itself, obviously there's so many different outside, whether it's council and the medical folks or everyone else that are helping create this thing. And so it's been quite impressive from my side, how it has been responsive and quite frankly, able to do some things that people have wanted from the NCA and AMA for a long time in terms of directly answering questions and kind of being on the pulse of things that are happening that other times may take a lot longer to get to that point of needing some sort of national consensus. But on the other side of it, then it then provides another place you have to look to for answers. And one of the things that I worry about the most is we talked about what's going to stick around is then having to revert back to what we were doing before and try and navigate the difference between, okay, well, this was a COVID specific issue. Even we're looking going into this winter, what were things that we told people they could do during that break in the summer that maybe we're not going to be able to continue to do, mostly in the bylaw 17 area here in the winter. So I guess to that end, maybe, is there any sort of things that you guys are looking for or want from the membership as we're addressing, as we're asking questions or submitting waivers or bringing up issues, complaining generally?
That engagement is key. I think the number of COVID related meetings that I'm a part of in a week continues to be staggering. I mean, it's at least one team or more a day, almost every day, and then trying to put a bow on it by Wednesday, Thursday, and then get it polished and ready to publish on Friday with the help of our web help desk and our communication staff who actually run the website part of all that. Mm-hmm. So for me, the membership engagement is critical. And that's where, again, having a NAAC feedback group, relying on the officers as that kind of sounding board for some of those things, relying on the conferences and their advisory group to do that, because we know everybody's busy and everybody is still dealing with the normal job on top of what this COVID environment has layered on top of that. Mm-hmm. So the challenge there for the membership, I think, is to continue to be thoughtful about what are those questions that really need to be answered. And what I've tried to help our team continue to do is think about how do we help the membership remember that, yes, it's been 8-9 months, but we're still in it. Right. And I think it's that, like you mentioned before, with the coaches and others saying, well, we were told July, and then we were told August, and then we were told October, and now it's January. I feel like there is that yearning to get back to the way things were in 2019. And that's just doesn't look like it's coming in 2020. And we may have to continue to labor under this new normal into 2021. Right. So that's the piece that I think folks really need to think about is it's not like, oh, the things that we used to do around this time of year, it's just going to kind of be the norm because it's been almost a year. Mm-hmm. And we're just not there yet. And I know that's challenging and probably frustrating both personally and professionally. Right. And that is something that we continue to look to the membership for on where do you need that help? Even if it's just having somebody to talk to, because you may think your coach or your AD or your sports supervisor has a different perspective on an issue than where from all the work you do day in and day out of where the membership generally is leaning. Yep. And you just need somebody to talk to about how to manage or facilitate that conversation. We want to make sure that we're still a resource to help the membership do that too. Sure.
Well, in terms of being a resource, I think I would kick myself. I didn't take a chance to ask you about some of the other big things that are happening, obviously, with NIL and transfer. I don't really have a question other than tell me what's going to happen. But it really is, as we're dealing with everything else, and these things are going to be happening in one way or another. Any updates or kind of notes or things that folks on campus should be doing or thinking about as we're starting to brave these new areas?
I talked earlier about how everybody's meeting more frequently. So I would say continue to pay attention when the council is getting together at least monthly, when the different committees, whether that's the Student Athlete Experience Committee or one of the oversight committees, as they're dealing with these different things. There are still a couple meetings coming up. We've got a mid-November council meeting. We've got a mid-December council meeting. For those who were tracking the mid-October council meeting, that's when you saw the concepts, at least in those areas, coming out and starting to get socialized. That happened to be right in the middle of my furlough. So I wasn't able to be a part of that particular meeting, but I've been reading the notes just like everybody else and trying to stay abreast of what's going on. So that's where I would tell people to continue to watch, because that transfer space, that concept that's been out there, and as you know, Commissioner Steinbrecher, as the chair of the current group, this is the memberships. We've been around the barn a couple times on this, and this is the one that feels like we're the most ready as a membership to actually effectuate change in that space. So starting to think about what that could mean for you as an administrator, for your programs, and ultimately for your student athletes as we start to look into 21. Yeah. That group is still meeting pretty regularly, so watch for opportunities to either share feedback or to contribute to a group that maybe is providing some feedback on that. But that's a piece that's really moving forward. And again, the goal is by January to have something decided.
Right.
The NIL space is a little broader, as you can imagine. That's been going on. It actually also predates the COVID-19 pandemic. But that's a space where, again, rapidly moving towards resolution. We're in the midst of still figuring out what, if anything, is going to be happening at the federal level that may influence that environment for us. But that hasn't changed the Legislative Solutions Group and what they've been trying to do. Lots of discussions still around potential for a third-party administrator to help be a part of that process and provide that again, third-party perspective on what may or may not happen. Right. The goal there continues to be looking for ways for student athletes to be able to use their NIL in the same way as non-students. Right. So what that looks like, recognizing that we have things like boosters in the athletic environment that a non-athlete wouldn't have to be as concerned about. If you've been following along, you know a big point of contention is still what's institutional involvement versus institutional assistance. Yep. Where do you draw a line between helping to educate your student athletes on how best to be entrepreneurial with their NLI opportunities, and where does it become, well, here's a list of our top donors, and we think any one of them will be more than happy to support you in whatever your endeavor happens to be. There's a lot of unanswered questions there, and I think those are things the membership's going to have to continue to work on through the winter as we get ready again for January. Right. If you did pay attention to what happened in mid-October, you recognize that the council did come out and say they'd be okay with potentially breaking apart some of those concepts. So we may see progress continue in some areas and maybe take some slightly different paths in some other areas. I don't have a crystal ball on exactly what that will look like, but those would be the things that I'd encourage folks to pay attention to when you're not focused on your COVID-19 responsibilities.
Right. Well, and if you did have that crystal ball, you may be doing something else with your time and talking.
That's right.
But as you said, obviously the federal level obviously is going to play a big part in whether we come to a decision or get superseded. So, well, Kris, I sincerely appreciate your time and talking to us about some things going on there in your world, being a part of the NAAC conversation. So thank you everyone for taking your time to watch our talk. Be active, reach out, keep letting Kris know what's going on in your world. So hopefully it can make some change for other folks as well. So take care.
Thank you.